Hi guys, this is Bhumi from your Hot Seat video every month, and today we are speaking with Laura, who will be focusing on where our business is still facing challenges in looking after their external workforce and what can they objectively do about it. So I'm the founder and CEO at InteriMarket, your total contractor community and engagement platform. We help businesses support their external contract workforce and retain your best talent. Laura, thank you very much for being online with us. Thank you for your time. It's holidays and everything, so I really appreciate it. Why don't you please introduce yourself, because you've got an amazing background, so we'd love to learn more.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a challenge to introduce myself because I have a couple of things going on at once. I'm managing director and impact strategist at an impact investment company called Red Rocks, and we look to fund solutions that are focused on the Sustainable Development Goals set up by the United Nations. But I'm also a brand and innovation consultant. I work with companies mostly in the HR tech and fintech space, companies that are either looking to scale operations or renew or refresh their brand, or generally work on innovation projects. So I work with, as well, HR leadership teams, bringing design thinking to the employee experience. So I have several things going on, and of course I'm part of the gig economy. So this topic's very relevant.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for that introduction. I think there are a few things that are very important that we have been speaking about as well, design thinking, importance of brand, even as a startup and things. So before we jump into the questions, I want to ask a quick one on design thinking. Mm-hmm. So for any company or individual watching this who is interested in innovation and technology, what is your quick advice on design thinking? How does someone get started on it?
Well, you can over-engineer design thinking like anything else, but I think the key to design thinking is twofold. One is working closely with your customers throughout the process, and also being very iterative. So if you look at a typical planning cycle, you do your research, and then you brainstorm ideas. Usually this happens internally. Some of the better companies also do it in conjunction with customers. Then you brainstorm your solution and come up with your execution plan, and then you're off. Right. And where design thinking is different is throughout that process, throughout the brainstorming, throughout the iteration, throughout the execution, you're continuing to check back with your customers and look for opportunities to innovate and improve.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm sure many people, including startups that, watch this, will find that very useful. Thank you. So in order to sort of progress on the topic we have at hand, it is quite a heavy subject because we've been focused on contingent talks for a while now. And what we consistently find is that businesses are still facing a lot of challenges. So in your experience, what are those challenges?
Whoa, that's that's quite broad. Do you mean with respect to the gig economy or general challenges?
No, literally, just with regards to their contingent workforce and
okay. Yeah. Well, I think there's a general talent challenge and different schools of thought about to what extent it actually exists and what companies should do about it. But basically, companies most are undergoing some kind of transformation, even if it's just global growth and scale. They are transforming operations in some way. Many companies are still in the throes of various digitalization projects, which could mean something as simple as moving from paper to an automated system, or could mean something far more complex. And throughout this, it is difficult to have the right skills. Just to take an example out of the air, if you are a 40 or 30-year-old software company who recently moved from on-premise solutions to the cloud, that's an enormous change, and it requires a different skill set. Everything from how you develop and design your applications to how you implement them and serve customers. Everything changes. Right. So, and this is just one example of one type of company, right? And But other companies are undergoing the same sort of thing, that with new technology, there are new ways of operating and business models that are possible. Mm-hmm. And their current workforce may not have all of these skills ready. So then you have the question of, well, do we train people? Can we hire people? Or can we bring in some skills temporarily to help bridge the gap? So, this is a complex analysis. There's a lot that goes into it, including skills and availability, as well as costs. And effectiveness of whatever solution you do implement. And this, they struggle with this.
Absolutely. And I think you touched upon something very important, which is that they struggle with the whole piece as a whole, but also literally what solution to implement. Because in my experience, most businesses that we deal with or even speak with at the moment are still very much of the idea or view that, yes, they need something new and they're aware of it, they're mindful of it, but for them, it looks like a long journey, when actually in reality, it isn't. And I'm not saying that as a solution provider, but as somebody who has implemented tech before. It's not that complicated or that complex as a process. But why do businesses feel that it's so complex?
Probably because it is multifaceted. If you are a business working, let's take HR as an example, and you're working with mostly paper-based processes in different locations, and you want to consolidate on one global solution. Doing that today is, in cloud solutions, is far easier and faster than it used to be, but it's still a big deal. You have to agree on what these processes are going to be. You have to get buy-in, you have to get budget. Once you've done it, you have to train people to use the new solution. So you can just keep creating this laundry list of things that you mustn't forget to do, and you need to do them well. And it starts to expand from there. And each item on the list, of course, has touch points with other items. So it's basically, it's classical project management. So I don't know that it's any more complicated than any project has been. In some ways easier, and maybe, in some ways more challenging. But it is a lot of complexity to manage. And meanwhile, you have to do everything. You have to keep all the lights on as well. So it's that plus everything you were doing before. So it's a big chunk of work with a lot of complexity and a lot of moving parts.
Right. So for a short period of time, it feels like they're doing two things.
Yeah.
Although it will move them into a lot more efficient way of working in 6 months' time, let's say, of implementing something, or 3 months' time. But for a short period of time, it is almost duplicating and double amount of workload internally.
Yeah, and I've given you a very simple example too, just moving from paper processes to some kind of solution. That's one thing, but there are companies that are trying to do far more complicated things. They might be trying to optimize processes across the business. Right. They might be trying to integrate, different parts of the business. They might be trying to have real-time information into all kinds of levers that impact the business. And these are also very complicated. And as you said, picking the right solutions is, in some ways as difficult as then implementing it and then, getting it live and using it. These are all big pieces that require a lot of cooperation.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. Now, from an external workforce perspective, today the solutions are made up of various different niche tech, including human engagements and all sorts of things. Where do you see that the future between the niche integrations of 10 different solutions that's been working so far versus an ecosystem model lie? What do you think is happening in the future?
I believe we will see more of an ecosystem in future. Because, for a couple of reasons. One, it's simply not possible for one solution to do everything. Now, someone very clever may come up with some kind of AI-based master controller that rules them all. But in the meantime, you'll continue to have point solutions across the business that need to be managed as an ecosystem. So ecosystem management will be as important a skill as, the specialized skills that it takes to manage one or several of these solutions.
Absolutely. And what do you see providers like Workdays and ATS systems like those? What do you see them doing, or where do you feel that they will start participating in this gig economy? Because they do seem to have solutions which are predominantly for everything but external workforce. Or do you see them participating at all?
Well, I think most HR solutions today manage contingent workers to a certain extent. You can, for example, report on who's a contingent worker in your organization, what department do they sit in, what manager is looking after them. Maybe the more sophisticated solutions can also tell you what they cost. Now, this assumes that someone put them in the solution.
Yeah, if they're used, yes.
And then there's still the handoff to finance, which ultimately, pays the contractors. So in terms of truly managing them, and I think what you're getting at is more of the engagement piece, the collaboration piece, making sure that these people are selected according to similar, maybe not the same criteria as employees, but someone's looking to make sure cultural fit of, the right skills are there, that they're, that there's a need for them, that someone's eyeing them through that lens, that there's some sort of maybe standardized onboarding process, that, as they work with teams, that maybe they participate in team building activities, maybe they're able to participate in coaching or professional development while they're with the business. Of course, they're paid promptly. That should go without saying. In terms of that, I actually don't know. I think it's going to depend on the individual HCM solutions. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think some will do more. If they see this as an opportunity, others may leave this to third-party providers to plug in and offer these additional capability as they become necessary.
Yeah. I've definitely been seeing a lot of plugins happening.
Yeah.
So that is, and I think that is forming part of the ecosystem, right? So not every company or the tech provider has to do everything, as long as they have the right partnerships in place.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions that came to my mind when we were speaking about this was actually about the journey, of when we see the engagement levels or the retention levels of contractors within a business. We're talking about biases a lot. We're talking about inequality a lot. And we're now even talking about pay scales and benefits.
Yeah.
So we've seen in the case of Uber and others how they've had to step up for their contingent workers. What do you feel? Is that a challenge for a corporate? Let's forget about Uber freelance sort of workers, but for contingent workers that dedicate 6 to 12 months in a business, do you feel that businesses and corporates are starting to look at that as a challenge as well?
I'm sure that some are. It really depends. I think it's almost a numbers game. If you are a business run predominantly by in-house full-time employees, traditional, which I do believe this traditional model will change in many industries, because it's as people start comparing the numbers, it's just not cost effective to have someone sitting there 5 days a week with full benefits, et cetera, in every kind of role. So I think companies are going to be looking to, where is this absolutely necessary, and where can we do it differently to cut costs. So I think that as the number of gig, and this I think is the key point, as the number of gig workers increases in a given organization, it by definition becomes more important. You have to pay attention to it. If 40% of your workforce is contingent, freelancers, gig workers, et cetera, and all you're doing is, carefully looking after your employees and letting finance look after these other folks, you're flying blind, you're not being cost effective, and you're not being very strategic.
Right.
Whereas if you only have 1 or 2 contractors in the entire business, then there's no need for you to give it all of this special attention. So I think it will be by necessity. If once the number hits a certain swing mass, companies will increasingly pay attention to it. And then it becomes a competition for the best contract workers. The war for talent takes on an entirely new flavor, as we all try and get 10% of the best,
Yeah.
the best possible person.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time on this, Laura. Before we close, I just wanted to ask for a closing remark or recommendation on this topic generally, the businesses facing challenges with external workforce.
Yeah.
So what would be your closing remark and recommendation?
Oh, do I have to, I could just pick one thing? I think there, if I can list just a couple of things, if that's okay, if we have time.
Yes.
The first is to think about the people agenda more holistically, especially if you are an organization that has a large or growing number of contingent workers. Start now, start thinking about this holistically, get ahead of the curve. Don't wait until you have so many contingent workers and are completely blind as to how they're doing or why they're there, or whether they get paid on time. So I would look at that now, and I would invite companies to start looking at solutions that are dedicated to manage contingent workers at this point, and rather than waiting for your HCM solution to deliver that. I just think that's making good sense. And the other is, as part of this holistic people agenda, look at the total work experience for your contingent workers as well. If you depend on them and if they do work for your business that's important, you want to hear from them. You want to include them in your employee engagement surveys. You want to know how you're treating them, and know that if in 6 months someone really great, you want to contract them again, that they want to also come to you given other opportunities. So start thinking of them as part of your talent pipeline. And then the final thing is, as this grows, the analytics become so important. You absolutely must know who you have, where they work, how they're doing, why they're there, and what they cost. Because if you don't have that information for a growing part of your workforce, that's a big blind spot.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Laura. This has been fantastic, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers are going to really appreciate some of this advice. And to everyone else as well, I hope you find this useful. Feel free to like, share, and comment, and we will see you next time for another session. Thank you.